The French Revolution was not the glorious uprising of liberty against tyranny that some histories proclaim. It was a grotesque carnival of blood, betrayal, and fanaticism, where the high ideals of liberté, égalité, fraternité drowned in the gutters of Paris, choked by the stench of severed heads and burning flesh. The rot beneath the surface. By the late 18th century, France was a festering wound. The monarchy, led by the indecisive Louis XVI and his despised Austrian queen, Marie Antoinette, wallowed in extravagance while peasants starved. Bread prices soared, taxes crippled the poor, and the nobility hoarded wealth with callous indifference. The Estates General of 1789, meant to address the crisis, only exposed the deep fractures in society. When the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly, the stage was set for chaos. But this was no noble struggle. It was the beginning of anarchy. The storming of the Bastille, the first blood. On July 14, 1789, a frenzied mob stormed the Bastille, not for freedom, but for gunpowder. The prison, a symbol of royal oppression, held only 7 inmates, hardly a den of tyranny. Yet the crowd butchered Governor Delaunay, stabbed him repeatedly, then paraded his head on a pike through the streets. The revolution had tasted blood, and it would hunger for more. The Great Fear and the reign of the mob. As paranoia spread, peasants burned manor houses, slaughtering nobles and their families. The Grand Peur, Great Fear, was not justice, it was butchery. In the countryside, landlords were hacked apart, their wives raped, their children thrown into fires. The National Assembly, desperate to control the madness, abolished feudalism, but the violence had already spiraled beyond reason. The Women's March, a prelude to savagery. In October 1789, thousands of starving women, armed with knives and pikes, marched to Versailles. They broke into the palace, hunting for the queen, screaming for her entrails. Marie Antoinette barely escaped, but her guards were torn to pieces, their heads mounted on spikes. The royal family was dragged to Paris, humiliated and imprisoned, a prelude to their doom. The guillotine's rise, industrialized murder. By 1791, the revolution had birthed its most infamous tool, the guillotine. Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine promised a humane death, but the machine became a symbol of terror. The Legislative Assembly, then the radical Jacobins, turned France into a slaughterhouse. King Louis XVI, once a divine monarch, was reduced to citizen capet. In January 1793, he was led to the scaffold, his final words drowned by drum rolls. The blade fell, and the crowd cheered as his blood pooled on the wood. His son, the Dauphin, would die in filth, abused and forgotten in a prison cell. The Reign of Terror. A nation devours itself. Under Maximilien Robespierre, the Committee of Public Safety declared virtue through bloodshed. The law of suspects allowed anyone to be arrested for the slightest hint of disloyalty. Revolutionary tribunals sentenced thousands in minutes. Paris became a city of death. The Place de la Revolution reeked of rotting heads. The tricoteuses, old women who knitted as they watched executions, cackled at each falling blade. Even former revolutionaries were not spared. Georges Danton, once a fiery orator, went to the guillotine, sneering, "Show my head to the people. It is worth the trouble." The Vendée uprising was drowned in genocide. Republican troops massacred men, women, and children, drowning them in the Loire, burning villages, and even conducting grotesque medical experiments on the dying. Somewhere between 80,000 and 300,000 perished. The fall of the fanatics. Robespierre, the incorruptible, grew drunk on power. He outlawed Christianity, replacing God with the cult of the supreme being. But the revolution always eats its own. In July 1794, the convention turned against him. His jaw shattered by a gunshot, he was dragged to the guillotine like the thousands he had condemned. The crowd roared as his head fell. Justice, if such a thing existed, had come full circle. Aftermath, a legacy of ruin. The directory that followed was corrupt and unstable. The revolution had not brought liberty, only different tyrants. The people, weary of bloodshed, welcomed Napoleon Bonaparte, a dictator in republican clothing. The cycle of violence had merely paused. The French Revolution was not a triumph of enlightenment. It was a descent into madness, where the oppressed became oppressors, where ideals were drowned in rivers of blood. The guillotine did not discriminate. It took kings, peasants, radicals, and innocents alike. And in the end, the only true victor was death. France had torn down the old world, but what rose from the ashes was not freedom, only a different kind of hell. The French Revolution promised to shatter chains, but for women, it forged new ones from the bones of broken hopes. They marched, bled, and roared for liberty, only to be silenced with ink and iron. Olympe de Gouges wrote truth with trembling hands and paid with her head. Her cries for equality drowned beneath the blade that once symbolized justice. The same crowds that cheered for freedom jeered at women demanding a voice. While men drafted rights in candlelit halls, women were dragged into shadows, gagged by laws and buried under forgotten slogans. The revolution devoured its mothers, then erased their names.